Hey guys, hey, it's Matthew. Just sort of, I was looking at some student work, a real beautiful drawing, and the documentation. It's not bad, in fact, let me just kind of back up for a second. If you haven't used Bridge yet, Bridge is a really nice application where you can, for example, navigate to a project folder, which I'm always encouraging everyone to set up, whether it's a drawing or a graphic design or a digital media class. But essentially, everything should go into a project folder. And so this is actually a project associated with a drawing class that I'm managing. And this is one of my favorite projects. It's called Memory Landscape, where I ask students to sort of draw something that's really in their mind, that's really core to their being and their individuality and their existence, really, like something that's very clear to you. Most likely it's a place that you revisited or experienced a lot when you were a child, and it just kind of has a lot of meaning to you. And so you take a photograph, and then in this particular example, this is the original photo I received from the student. Okay. So real beautiful, I mean, just incredible details, and then I treat the photograph by overlaying a grid on top of it. Okay. And this is an 18 by 24-inch sheet of paper or matrix, just FYI. And then I run it through software and sort of unpack different values that are going to be handy for completing the project. Okay. So just to kind of give you an idea of, what this project is, and, it involves some digital technology, but to sort of map out and distill, these different values that can then be used to make decisions, studio decisions. So for example, maybe you're going to use 6 different graphite pencils, uh, ranging from hard to soft, so that you can get that tonal value range. And sometimes you're going to use a micron pen or charcoal, or really, those are decisions that the students make. But this is just a really handy sort of technological process to again distill these tonal values out of a photograph, so that you can move forward. Seeing them all together, you see there's a 3-color trace right here, and then there's a 6-color trace. And so, of course, the 6-color trace is going to give you a lot more just incredible detail. And so I love this project. And I mean, I love the image, everything about it was just really incredible to me. And then these are some of the photographs that I received from the student for the project upload. And you can kind of see, it looks to me like this photograph of the drawing was essentially kind of taken on a drawing, probably a dining room table, or somewhere with incandescent light. So in other words, the photograph was not taken with natural light. Um, and and what I really like about this project upload is I received multiple different examples. So 1, 2, here's another full image right there. And then here's one without the edges. And so I can go back and I can do some editing myself. And that's essentially what I'm about to do with you all. And then there are some kind of like more detailed shots kind of happening here, which are a little bit handy. The nice thing about Bridge is when you can take this tool here, and you can click on an image, and then you can kind of look at the multiple different images, or I guess examples of documentation that you grabbed, so that you can decide which one is best. So that's, hold on one second. Zoom out a little bit so that we can see. So this is a really handy just tool when you're trying to decide, okay, which digital negative should I work with? Which one is going to essentially help me the most? And so this one I can see actually got a little bit blurry here. And so I'm not going to use that one. The second one looks like it's a little bit more clear. And then the third one, let's kind of compare and contrast the third compared to the second. And by the way, notice how I'm looking in a particular location too. I'm going to go with this second version. I think that's the best to work with, okay? So now I'm going to right click, open with Photoshop. And really, what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of walking you guys through, if you're a visual artist, you need good documentation of your work, okay? And I would suggest that, this angle that this particular student used to document the drawing, it looks really good. It's straight on. The lighting is to be desired, if you ask me, and I'm not sure, what kind of camera was used, but generally, if you're using an iPhone or an Android device, I they work just fine, and the quality is pretty darn good as well. I would suggest that you take your t-shirt and just kind of wipe off the lens to make sure. I don't know about you guys, but my phone gets a little bit kind of mucky and dirty, especially the lens. Sometimes I'll take a photograph and I'll wonder why it's so fuzzy. And I'll just wipe off the lens a little bit and then things look normal again. But make sure that you do that if you're using an iPhone device or a phone, and that you've been handling. And yeah, and then just try to get the image as straight on as possible and leave a little bit of wiggle room around the drawing so that you can sort of remove that information later. Okay. So yeah, first thing I need to do is adjust the white balance. And so this paper is actually a little bit off white naturally, I think, but there's this corner over here where this student did not apply any graphite or any medium. So I'm going to use that area to set my white balance. I could go in here, like there are certain areas where I feel like it might work, like right there, or even right there is pretty good actually. So to do that, you come up here to image, adjustments, and this is, by the way, using Photoshop. This is pretty standard stuff. And if you come over here to levels, it's going to open up this dialog box. You can also access that by just simply hitting Command L on your keyboard, and the same thing will pop up. Okay, so that's the shortcut. And this bell curve actually looks really healthy. It's pretty healthy, but I think the exposure could be bumped up a little bit, but I don't see anything being overexposed or anything funny. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select this tool right here. It says sample in image to set white point. So essentially we're setting the white balance because, as I've stated before in many of my classes, the best circumstance to photograph a drawing is on a cloudy day outside. So you find a way to kind of hang it, on you know, somehow you find a way to hang it, on a wall, preferably not in direct sunlight. But if it's a cloudy day, what happens is that light gets diffused and it's bouncing around a little bit more successfully. So you get a real nice, even documentation of your drawing or painting. If you try to photograph a drawing or painting in direct sunlight, it's just not going to work, guys. So that light is really good, but it's better if you're outside and you're photographing the drawing sort of like in a little bit of shade. If it's a really sunny day, it's got to be in the shade. If it's an overcast day, you should still sort of be in the shade a little bit, but trust me, you'll see the results and you'll be quite impressed. And so that's something that you just sort of experience when you see the magic happening, because the documentation is going to show like the colors, for example, in your painting really accurately, or the color of the paper really accurately. Like right now, I know that this paper, it's a little bit dim and it almost kind of looks a little bit more on the yellow side. And the reason being is because tungsten lighting or indoor lighting is sort of designed to be a little bit more warm, the temperature. And so, but that doesn't work out so well when you're taking photographs of things. Okay, it just doesn't capture things accurately. And that's really, really important when you're documenting artwork, because you want your colors and everything to sort of, you're doing the best that you can to give this virtual experience, as to what folks are going to see. This drawing, it looks a little rough. There's some corners that are a little bit rough. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. I guess if you're pinning something on the wall, you can also sort of pin really like far on the corner, and maybe in Photoshop, you can sort of take it out down the road, those little pins. But the more sort of prep and work you can do ahead of time to sort of get a good digital image to work with, the easier it's going to be down the road when you're editing. I don't know how else to say that. Okay. So anyway, so we just kind of remind you guys, I'm going to back up again, image, adjustments, levels. This dialog box pops up, and then you can set your white point with this tool right there. And I'm going to set my white balance point right here. And you can see, look at the way that brightened up beautifully. It's really, really nice. Okay. And so then I can, if I just want to try a different location, I can cruise around and you can kind of see the difference in setting, you know, a white point in a variety of locations on a drawing. So that's really drastically different. I don't really quite like that. Let's see. I have a suspicion that that's a good place to select white balance right there. That feels good to me. So kind of sampling a few different areas, but just notice how everything kind of brightened up. And the paper really truly does look, you know, like this sort of more like ivory white right now instead of like this sort of eggshell, this open range-free eggshell color. You know, now it's more like, you know, Arctic or some sort of like cleaner white, I guess. So that looks good to me. So I'm going to hit OK. The other thing I want to do is I don't want to overwrite the student's original file. So I'm going to File. I'm going to come up here to File, Save As, and I want to make this into a Photoshop file. And so I'm actually going to name this Final 2 as well, because that can be handy so that you know, okay, this is the final image that we're working with here. And hit Save. The next thing you can do is you can come up here to Filter, and you can come down here to Lens Correction. And that will bring up this box. And believe it or not, in Photoshop, the lens correction filter will sort of recognize it does its best to recognize the camera that was used. So for example, if you're using a Nikon D90 or whatever, you know, it'll recognize that. It didn't go all the way, so I'm going to sort of guess a little bit, and I'm just going to say iPhone 7. No, that is not even close. So yeah, I think that's the best we'll be able to do, and I'm just going to hit OK. But just kind of keep in mind that you can, if you know exactly what kind of machine or camera or phone that you're using, the model number, you can plug in that information and it'll understand the details of the lens that you were using so that it can remove the distortion. Because remember, a camera sort of naturally distorts an object. And, you know, there are certain lenses, like, you know, just to get into the weeds here, like if you're using a more manual camera, the type of lens that you want to be using is a 50mm. And the reason being is because a 50mm has the least amount of distortion, okay? And that's the best you're going to get when you're using a manual camera. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. That looks good to me. And you can see it did make some slight changes, okay? It kind of reduced the warp a little bit. So now, let's see, I'm just going to test this theory. If I hit E for eraser, now I can sort of delete this information, and what's being shown here is alpha channel. So let me, whoops, zoom in here, just to kind of show you. So yeah, there's that alpha channel being revealed. So, but I know that this is an 18 by 24 inch sheet of paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit C for crop, and then I'm going to plug in 18 by 24 up here at the top. And of course, I want it to be a different aspect ratio. So I need to hit these little arrows up here at the top. And now it's landscape mode. Okay. So essentially what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to, wait, before I do that, I want to straighten the image too. Okay. And this is a really handy thing. So you come up here, there's this little icon where it says straighten. So you can sort of grab from one end of the drawing, just drag to the other end as closely as possible. And you want to straighten the top of the drawing. This one was actually pretty close to being straight, but it did make a small correction. So now you can just kind of start tightening in the reins a little bit. And I know it's not perfect right now. Don't worry about that. We'll try to make it a little bit more perfect. But you never want to delete any of the paper information or drawing information. So what I do is I just kind of go in and slowly sort of eke in these edges. And by the way, I don't need to keep like, the wherever it was ripped from the spiral. I definitely want to get rid of that. So I think we can bring this in more. And remember, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect right now, because we're going to make some corrections in another moment. So just kind of hold the phone. So that's pretty good though. That's 18 by 24. And the thing to keep in mind also when you're using the crop tool in Photoshop is it's not 24 by 18 inches. Photoshop is thinking, okay, 18 by 24 aspect ratio. Okay. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right. So it's not really a scaled cropping approach that you're taking. It's more of like an aspect ratio cropping method. So I've got it where I want it. Now you can hit enter, or you can come up here and hit this little checkbox right there. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to come in and sort of like start pulling this drawing to the 18 by 24 inch sort of edges. Okay. And in order to do that, I'm going to hit Command T for transform. And notice how when I did that, the dialogue or options kind of changed here a little bit here at the top. So Command T, there you see those options. And then you can come over here and there's this really fun tool called switch between free transform and warp modes. So we want to like kind of warp this drawing out a little bit. So I clicked that on, and now I've got these really cool little like anchor points or points where I can pull the image out a little bit. So I'm just going to start. I always start in the four corners, I'll tell you. So like I'll kind of pull these guys out so that I feel like the paper is as close to the edge as possible. So I reached that edge and I reached this edge, so I'm good there. This one needs to be pulled out this direction. So see how I'm kind of warping this drawing out a little bit. And again, it's very difficult to photograph a drawing perfectly because it has to do with taking the image straight on, but it also has to do with the lens that you're using or the technology. So, but we can make some corrections in Photoshop as well. So I'm just kind of pulling or eking these corners out a hair, just like so. Pretty cool. And, I'm not a huge fan of Photoshop, but for doing this kind of stuff, when you're editing a photo, which is really the only thing I believe Photoshop should be used for, it's a pretty fantastic tool. But I don't think that Photoshop should be used for anything beyond photographs. I think that Adobe Illustrator and Adobe InDesign are much better tools for that sort of thing. So now you have these sort of anchors that you can also sort of push up a little bit. And I'm just trying to remove. I kind of want to push this up just a little more, remove that red. Looks to me like that's pretty good. I don't need to. Yeah, I'm just kind of making these very subtle adjustments, and I'll do multiple passes, by the way. I'll go around the drawing 2, maybe sometimes 3 times, because you have to make these little corrections, right? Now I think that's a fold in the paper. And so I'm not going to pull that out any further. I might Photoshop that to kind of clean it up otherwise, because if I pull that out even further, it'll falsely distort the image, right? If that makes sense. And same here, that's like a fold in the paper. But you guys, this is really an important process because you need good documentation of your drawings if you're going to email images to possible buyers or galleries, or maybe you're working on a portfolio for graduate school. You need good documentation. Otherwise, it's not going to happen for you. Just trust me on that. You need good documentation of your work. That looks good to me. So I'm going to hit the checkbox, boom, and now it's the 18 by 24 image. You know, pretty nice. I did promise you that we were going to look at these corners. So I'm going to zoom in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some of the paper color that's here. And then I'm just going to simply just do a little bit of that. You know, I know it's not ideal, but I'd rather that red was just not there. Okay, guys. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab this kind of gray color. And I'm going to hit B for brush. I'm just going to sort of just clean it up just a little bit. I'm not changing the drawing a whole lot. I'm just making a very subtle adjustment. All right, works for me. I guess, you know, I could have kind of gotten a little bit more surgical with that brush action by making the pixel area instead of 100 pixels. I could have made it 50. But again, this is a tutorial. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Command S to save my work. Okay, and I think it'd be fun to sort of compare the two. So here is the original image. And if I go into my project folder, let's see, I believe let's go back to Bridge. It's project 2, 1. Okay, so it was this image. I wonder if we can open this in preview. Yeah. So now you guys can sort of see, you know, where we started and where we ended up. So I definitely prefer the version on the left. Okay. This is just a process that I've sort of developed over the years because I have the same issues. You know, I'm always trying to photograph paintings or drawings or any kind of physical work, but I want it to be as accurate as possible. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is that using a tripod actually is really important. Because even like, you know, a little bit of a shake in your hand, the other thing that you can do is you can hold your breath when you hit the shutter. So you try to hold as still as possible because that makes a big difference as far as the clarity of these images. And of course, when you're doing all this intricate cross hatching and work with it within your drawing, it's important that you photograph those hatch marks with clarity. Okay. So you have to hold your breath, or in an ideal world, you might even have a tripod, you know, and then you can set the timer to engage. You know, you hit the timer and then like maybe like 5-10 seconds later it actually engages, and that way you get even more clarity within your images. Those are things like just lessons that I've learned over the years, and I'm just passing it on. Okay, folks, that's enough. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.